The woman stood at the edge of the bridge, her designer coat whipping in the January wind. Ethan Carter saw her the moment he turned onto the river path, his daughter's small hand still warm in his. They had just left the hospital. Another round of tests, another stack of bills he couldn't pay. Maya's heart was failing slowly, and his world had shrunk to the size of her medical charts. But this woman, this stranger with the hollow eyes and the thousand shoes, she was about to step off into the black water below, and Ethan's daughter was watching. He had 3 seconds to decide. Stay on the concrete with the child who needed him to survive, or dive into the freezing river after someone who wanted to die? He chose wrong. Or maybe he chose right. He never figured out which. Ethan Carter had been a construction worker for 11 years. Before that, he was a husband. Before that, he was a man who believed the world made sense. His wife Sarah died 3 years ago, a car accident on a rainy Tuesday, and since then, he had stopped believing in much of anything. What remained was Maya, 7 years old, born with a heart that never worked quite right, and the only reason Ethan got out of bed each morning. Their apartment sat on the 4th floor of a building that should have been condemned. The elevator hadn't worked in 2 years. The radiator coughed more than it heated, but it was close to street, Michael's hospital, and that was all that mattered. Maya needed to be close to her doctors, close to the machines that monitored her failing heart, close to the people who might one day save her life. Ethan worked double shifts when he could, took every overtime opportunity, skipped meals so Maya could have her medications. His world had become very small. The construction site, the hospital, the apartment, nothing else existed. That evening, they left Street Michael's just after 6. The cardiologist had used words like stable and monitoring and cautiously optimistic, but Ethan heard only the silence between those words. Maya needed surgery eventually. Surgery cost money. Money he didn't have and couldn't borrow and had no way of earning fast enough. The river path was a shortcut home, 15 minutes instead of 25. Maya liked it because she could count the bridges. Ethan liked it because it was quiet, away from the traffic and the noise and the weight of other people's lives pressing against his own. They walked slowly, Maya's breath forming small clouds in the cold air, her hand gripping his fingers like she was afraid he might disappear. That was when he saw her. The woman stood at the edge of the walkway just past the 3rd bridge. She wore a coat that looked like it cost more than Ethan's monthly rent, maybe 2 months' rent. Her hair was dark, tangled by the wind. She stood perfectly still, staring down at the black water below. Ethan knew that posture. He had seen it once before, years ago, when his cousin stood on the roof of their grandmother's house after losing his job and his marriage in the same month. That cousin was dead now. Ethan had been too young, too far away, too slow to understand what he was seeing. He was not too slow anymore. Maya, stay here. His voice came out sharper than he intended. Don't move. He walked toward the woman, his boots heavy on the concrete. The closer he got, the more certain he became. Her hands hung limp at her sides. Her shoulders were slumped. She wasn't looking at the water like someone admiring the view. She was looking at it like someone saying goodbye. Mom. Ethan stopped about 10 feet behind her. Are you okay? The woman didn't turn around. Her voice came out flat, drained of everything. Go away. It's cold out here. Whatever's happening, this isn't the answer. I said, go away. The words fell like stones into still water. Ethan took another step forward. My name is Ethan. Ethan Carter. I'm not going to touch you. I just want to talk. The woman finally turned her head. He saw her face in profile. Sharp features, expensive makeup smeared by tears, eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in days. She was beautiful in the way that magazine covers were beautiful. Polished, perfect, and utterly lifeless. You don't know me, she said. You don't know anything about my life. So, please just take your daughter and go home. Ethan held his ground. I know that water is about 40 degrees. I know the current's strong enough to pull you under in seconds. I know that once you go down, you don't come back up. Maybe that's the point. Maybe. But my daughter's standing over there watching us, and I don't want her to see someone die tonight. She's seen enough death already. Something shifted in the woman's expression. She looked past Ethan toward Maya, who stood 20 feet away with her arms wrapped around herself, shivering in the cold. "She's sick," the woman said quietly. "I can tell the way she stands, the way she breathes. Something's wrong with her. Her heart, she was born with it. And you still have time to worry about strangers. That's what people do." The woman laughed, a short, bitter sound that had no humor in it. "No, that's what fools do. Smart people protect what's theirs and let the rest of the world burn." She turned back to the water. "My name is Lena Whitmore. You can look me up tomorrow if you want. CEO of Whitmore Technologies. 15 years of my life, building something from nothing. And now I stand at the top, and I realize there's no one there. No one who knows me. No one who would care if I disappeared. I'd care. You don't even know me. I know you're standing on the edge of a bridge in January, talking to a stranger instead of jumping. That tells me part of you doesn't want to do this." Lena shook her head slowly. "You're wrong. I've already decided. I decided weeks ago. I just couldn't find the right moment until now." She took a step closer to the edge. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. "Please," he said. "Just come with me. We'll get coffee. We'll talk tomorrow. Everything might look different. Nothing looks different anymore. That's the whole problem." Ethan reached out his hand. "Let me help you remember what the ground feels like." Lena stared at his hand for a long moment. The wind howled between the buildings. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Then she turned away from him and stepped off the edge. Ethan didn't think. His body moved before his mind caught up, and he was over the railing before he realized what he was doing. He heard Maya scream behind him, a sound that would echo in his nightmares for years. And then, the water swallowed him whole. The cold hit him like 1,000 knives at once. It crushed his lungs, seized his muscles, scrambled his thoughts into white noise. The current spun him in circles, dragging him deeper, and for a moment he couldn't tell which way was up. He forced his eyes open against the burning cold and saw a flash of Lena's coat below him. She was sinking, arms spread wide, not fighting, not swimming, just falling. He kicked toward her. Every stroke felt like dragging his body through wet concrete. His fingers were already going numb. He grabbed her arm and pulled, hauling her dead weight toward the surface, toward the light, toward the air he desperately needed. They broke through together, gasping, choking, the current still trying to drag them under. Ethan's feet found a rock, then another. The riverbed was shallow here, a random mercy, and he dragged Lena toward the bank with the last of his strength. He hauled her onto the concrete and collapsed beside her, coughing water and blood and fear. Maya was there in seconds, her small arms wrapped around his neck, her tears hot against his frozen skin. "Daddy, Daddy, are you okay?" He wanted to answer. He wanted to tell her everything was fine, but his body had stopped listening to his commands, and all he could do was lie there shaking, watching the paramedics arrive in a blur of red and blue lights. He had saved a stranger's life. He had left his daughter alone on the riverbank. He had broken every rule he'd set for himself since Sarah died, and he had no idea what would happen next. The hospital was different this time, not street. Michael's with its cracked ceiling tiles and overworked nurses. This was Mercy General, the private hospital on the hill where rich people went to heal in rooms that looked like hotel suites. Ethan woke up in a bed softer than anything he'd ever slept on, wrapped in heated blankets, an IV dripping something warm into his veins. Maya sat in a chair beside him, her legs dangling above the floor. Someone had given her hot chocolate and a coloring book. She looked up when he stirred, and her face broke into a smile that made his chest ache. "Daddy? You're awake." He tried to sit up, but his muscles screamed in protest. "How long was I out?" The doctor said 8 hours. They said, "You almost died." Her voice trembled on the last word. They said the water was really, really cold. Ethan reached out and took her hand. It was warm, alive, real. "I'm okay, baby. I'm right here." A nurse appeared in the doorway, followed by a doctor in a white coat that probably cost more than Ethan's entire wardrobe. The doctor introduced himself as Dr. Harrison, head of emergency medicine, and explained that Ethan had suffered moderate hypothermia, but would make a full recovery. He also mentioned almost casually that all medical expenses had been covered. "Covered by who?" Ethan asked. Harrison smiled the way rich people smile. When they're about to deliver good news they think you should be grateful for. Miss Whitmore. She's in the East Wing recovering. She's asked to see you when you're feeling up to it. Ethan didn't feel up to it. He felt like a man who had jumped into a frozen river to save a stranger, and was now lying in a bed he couldn't afford in a hospital he didn't belong in, while his daughter sat beside him coloring pictures of butterflies, but he nodded anyway because what else could he do? They brought him to Lena's room an hour later. It was 3 times the size of his apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Lena sat propped up against pillows, wearing a hospital gown that somehow looked elegant on her. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, but she was alive. That counted for something. M. Carter. Her voice was hollow, damaged by river water, and screaming, "Please sit down." Ethan sat in the chair beside her bed, keeping Maya close. The girl stared at Lena with the unfiltered curiosity of children studying her like a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. "You're the lady from the bridge," Maya said. "The one Daddy saved." Lena's eyes flickered to the girl, then back to Ethan. "Yes, I am. Why did you jump?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Ethan started to apologize, to explain that kids say things without thinking. But Lena held up her hand. "It's a fair question," she said quietly. "I wish I had a good answer." She turned to Ethan, and for the first time, he saw something real beneath the polished surface. Something raw and broken and desperately human. "I don't know how to thank you. Money seems insulting. Words seem insufficient. You risked your life for someone you'd never met. Someone who didn't want to be saved. You would have done the same." "No." Lena shook her head. "I wouldn't have. That's the difference between us, Mr. Carter. You still believe people are worth saving. I stopped believing that a long time ago." Over the following days, Ethan learned what it meant to be pulled into someone else's world. Lena insisted on paying for everything. Maya's follow-up appointments, Ethan's lost wages, even their groceries. A sleek black car appeared outside their crumbling apartment building, ready to take them wherever they needed to go. Lena's assistant, a nervous young man named Derek, called 3 times a day to check if they needed anything. Ethan hated it. He hated the way the driver looked at their building, the way Derek's voice dripped with pity disguised as politeness, the way Maya's eyes lit up every time she climbed into that expensive car. He had spent 3 years building walls around their little life, keeping the world out, protecting what was his. Now those walls were crumbling, and he didn't know how to stop it. But Maya was thriving. Her color improved, her energy returned. The doctors at Mercy General, doctors Ethan could never have afforded, ran tests and adjusted medications, and talked about surgical options that sounded like miracles. For the first time in years, someone used the word hopeful when discussing his daughter's future. He couldn't take that away from her, not even to protect his pride. Lena was released from the hospital after 5 days, but she didn't disappear back into her tower. She kept reaching out, kept finding excuses to be part of their lives. She took Maya to a children's museum while Ethan was at work. She sent books about butterflies and horses and brave little girls who went on adventures. She showed up at their apartment one evening with takeout containers full of food. Maya had never tasted sushi and Thai curry and chocolate mousse in tiny glass cups. "You don't have to do this," Ethan said, standing in the doorway while Maya devoured a California roll at the kitchen table. "You don't owe us anything." Lena's eyes met his. "I owe you everything. You gave me back my life. The least I can do is help you take care of hers. This isn't about debt. Then what is it about?" He didn't have an answer. The truth was too complicated, too tangled up with class and pride, and the fear that he was losing control of his own story. Lena Whitmore was a force of nature. Wealthy, powerful, used to getting what she wanted. And what she seemed to want was to be part of Maya's life. Maybe part of his life, too. That thought terrified him more than the frozen river ever had. The tension grew with each passing day. Ethan and Lena circled each other like weary animals, drawn together by something neither of them could name, but too afraid to get close. They were from different worlds. He understood that. She wore clothes that cost more than his annual salary. She made decisions that affected thousands of employees. She lived in a penthouse with views of the entire city, while he climbed 4 flights of stairs to an apartment with a broken radiator. But when she looked at Maya, Something in her face softened, and when she looked at him, he saw the same loneliness he felt every night after Maya fell asleep. The ache of being the only adult in a world that didn't care if you survived. He was starting to care about her. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. 3 weeks after the river, Lena invited them to her penthouse for dinner. Ethan almost said no. The gap between their worlds felt too wide, too obvious, too painful to cross. But Maya begged, and he could never say no to Mia. The penthouse was everything he expected, and nothing he was prepared for. Glass walls, marble floors, art that probably cost more than his entire life's earnings. Maya ran from room to room, touching everything, asking questions. Lena answered with surprising patience. Ethan stood by the window, staring at the city lights below, feeling like an intruder in a world where he didn't belong. Lena came to stand beside him. She had traded her hospital gowns for a simple black dress, and she looked almost human without the armor of her corporate persona, almost vulnerable. "You hate it here," she said. It wasn't a question. Ethan shook his head. "I don't hate it. I just don't understand it." "What's to understand? It's just stuff. Expensive stuff that doesn't mean anything." "Then why do you have it?" Lena was quiet for a long moment, watching Maya explore the living room. "Because for a long time, I thought it would fill the emptiness. I thought if I achieved enough, acquired enough, controlled enough, I would finally feel like a real person. Instead, I just feel like a ghost haunting my own life." She turned to face him, and her eyes were wet. "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" Ethan nodded. "That night on the bridge, I've been telling everyone I slipped, that it was an accident, that I wasn't trying to." She stopped, her voice catching. "But the truth is, I don't know. I don't know if I slipped or if I jumped. I was standing there and the water looked so peaceful, and then I was falling. And I still don't know if I chose it or not." The confession hung between them like a held breath. Ethan understood what she was really saying, that the line between wanting to live and wanting to die could be so thin you might cross it without realizing. "Does it matter?" he asked quietly. "You're here now. You're alive. But for how long? What happens the next time I'm standing on an edge? What happens when there's no construction worker with a hero complex to pull me out? Then you call me." The words came out before he could stop them. "You call me and I'll come. I don't care what time it is. I don't care where you are. You call me and I'll be there." Lena stared at him like he'd just offered her something precious and impossible. "Why? Why would you do that for someone like me? Because you're not what you think you are." Ethan turned to face her fully. "You think you're empty. You think you're a ghost. But I've watched you with Maya. I've seen the way you light up when she laughs. I've seen you remember what joy feels like. That's not emptiness. That's just someone who forgot how to live. And you think you can teach me? I think we can teach each other." The moment stretched between them, fragile and electric. Ethan hadn't felt this way since Sarah. This pull toward another person. This terrifying desire to let someone in. He had spent 3 years convinced that his heart died with his wife. Now he was starting to wonder if it had just been sleeping. Maya came running back into the room, breaking the spell. "Daddy, she has a room full of books. Can I read one, please?" Lena smiled, and it was the first real smile Ethan had seen from her. Not the polished CEO smile or the grateful patient smile, but something genuine and warm. "You can read as many as you want," she told Ma. "Take your time." Mia disappeared down the hallway, and Lena turned back to Ethan. "She's remarkable, you know. Despite everything she's been through, she still sees the world as a place full of wonder. How does she do that? Kids are resilient. More resilient than adults sometimes." "No." Lena shook her head. "It's not just resilience. It's you. You've protected her from the worst of it. You've kept her believing in good things." Her voice dropped. "I never had that. My parents were too busy building empires to notice I existed. I raised myself on determination and spite. And look where it got me." "It got you here," Ethan said. "Standing in a penthouse with a view of the whole city. Alone. It got me here alone. You're not alone right now." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Neither of them was ready to fully acknowledge. Something had shifted between them. The relationship was no longer just about gratitude or debt, or the awkward dance of savior and saved. They had crossed into something else, something real. Lena made a decision that night. She told Ethan she was going to start therapy. She was going to face the emptiness she had been running from for 15 years. She didn't know if it would work. Didn't know if she could really change, but she wanted to try. For Maya, Ethan asked. For me? Lena said. But also because of you. Because you looked at me on that bridge like I was worth saving, even when I didn't believe it myself. I want to become the person you saw. Ethan felt something crack open in his chest, something he had kept locked away since Sarah's funeral. He had built his entire identity around being Maya's protector, around surviving one day at a time, around never needing anyone again. But standing here with Lena, watching the city lights reflect in her tear-filled eyes, he realized he had been fooling himself. He needed connection just as much as she did. He had just been too afraid to admit it. I'm scared, he said quietly. I haven't let anyone in since my wife died. I don't know if I remember how. Lena reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. Then we'll figure it out together. One day at a time. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't a promise of forever. It was something smaller and more honest. Two broken people agreeing to be broken together. And for now, that was enough. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Ethan was at the construction site when his phone started buzzing. Text after text, call after call from numbers he didn't recognize. His foreman showed him the headline on a tablet. CEO's River Rescue, affair or publicity stunt. Below it, a photograph of Ethan and Lena leaving Mercy General together, her hand on his arm, Maya walking between them. The article was brutal. It painted Ethan as either a calculated opportunist, preying on a vulnerable billionaire, or a naive fool being manipulated by a woman who would do anything for good press. It questioned whether the rescue was even real, whether the whole thing had been staged for publicity. It dug up his financial records, his late wife's death certificate, Maya's medical history. Nothing was private anymore. Nothing was sacred. Ethan's co-workers looked at him differently now, some with envy, some with suspicion, some with outright contempt. His foreman called him into the office and explained with visible discomfort that the company had received complaints. Clients didn't want a media circus on their job sites. He wasn't being fired exactly, just temporarily reassigned to administrative duties, which meant no hours, which meant no pay. Maya felt the pressure too. Kids at school had seen the news, heard their parents talking. They asked her questions she couldn't answer, made comments she didn't understand. She came home one afternoon in tears, asking why people were being mean about Daddy and the lady from the bridge. Ethan held her and told her people sometimes say things they don't mean, that the truth was more complicated than headlines, that everything would be okay. But he didn't believe his own words. For the first time since Sarah's death, he felt like he was losing control of his own life. Lena was facing her own storm. The board of directors at Whitmore Technologies called an emergency meeting to discuss concerns about leadership stability. They had seen the headlines, heard the whispers about her mental health. A CEO who had attempted suicide, whether the public story was accurate or not, was a liability. Shareholders were nervous. Partners were asking questions. She called Ethan late one night, her voice raw from crying. They want me to step back, take a leave of absence, get help. She laughed bitterly. As if I haven't been getting help. As if showing weakness means I can't do my job. What are you going to do? I don't know. Everything I've built is falling apart, and I don't know how to stop it. Ethan wanted to comfort her, but he had no comfort to give. His own life was unraveling just as fast. Bills were piling up. Maya's medications weren't cheap. Without work, without income, he was weeks away from losing everything. Maybe we made a mistake, he said quietly. Maybe I should have let you drown. The words came out harsher than he intended, and he regretted them immediately. But Lena didn't flinch. Do you mean that? No. He closed his eyes. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. I'm sorry. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. I'm sorry I couldn't just die quietly like I planned. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. If I had died that night, you'd still have your job. Maya would still be anonymous. Your life would still be yours, and you'd be dead. That's not a trade I'm willing to make." Silence stretched between them, filled with all the things they couldn't say. Ethan realized with sudden clarity that they had reached a crossroads. They could walk away from each other, try to salvage what remained of their separate lives. Or they could keep going, keep fighting, and risk losing everything. He thought about Maya, her laugh, her curiosity, her stubborn determination to see the good in everything. He thought about what he wanted to teach her about the world. Whether courage meant protecting yourself at all costs, or standing by the people you cared about, even when it hurt. "I'm not walking away," he said finally. "Whatever happens, I'm not walking away from you. Even if it destroys you, some things are worth being destroyed for." The board meeting happened 3 days later. Lena went in expecting a firing squad and found something worse. Sympathy laced with condescension. They didn't want to remove her. They wanted to support her recovery, which meant stepping back from day-to-day operations, which meant handing control to people who had been circling her position for years. She could have fought. She could have called lawyers, threatened lawsuits, played the corporate warfare game she had mastered over 15 years. Instead, she did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She told them the truth. She stood at the head of the conference table and admitted that yes, she had struggled with depression. Yes, she had stood on a bridge and considered ending her life. Yes, she was getting help now, working with a therapist, taking medication, trying to become someone she could live with. And no, she would not apologize for being human. The room went silent. Nobody knew how to respond. In a world of polished press releases and carefully managed narratives, raw honesty was the most disruptive force imaginable. When she finished speaking, one of the board members, an older woman named Margaret, who had been on the board since the company's founding, stood up and started clapping. Slowly, others joined her. Not everyone, but enough. Lena kept her job, barely with conditions and oversight, and a 6-month performance review that felt like a slow-motion execution, but she kept it. That night, she showed up at Ethan's apartment with a bottle of wine and dark circles under her eyes. Maya was already asleep. They sat on his second-hand couch, surrounded by boxes of unpaid bills and the faint smell of a radiator that still didn't work properly. "I did something terrifying today," she said. "I know. I saw the news. They're calling me brave, but I don't feel brave. I feel like I just jumped off another bridge, and I don't know if anyone's going to catch me this time." Ethan took her hand. "I caught you once. I can do it again." She leaned against his shoulder, and they sat there in silence. Two people who had nothing in common except the wreckage of their former lives. Outside, the city hummed with indifference. Inside, something new was taking shape, fragile, uncertain, but real. The call came at 3:00 the morning. Ethan was asleep on the couch. He had given Lena the bed, insisted she needed rest more than he did. When his phone screamed to life, the number was Street Michael's Hospital. His blood turned to ice before he even answered. Maya had collapsed at a sleepover. Her heart had stopped for 47 seconds before the paramedics arrived. She was alive, but barely. The doctors were running tests, talking about emergency surgery, using words like critical and unstable, and you should come now. Ethan ran. He didn't remember getting dressed, didn't remember the cab ride, didn't remember anything except the sound of his own heartbeat and the prayer repeating in his head. Please, please, please. Maya looked so small in the hospital bed. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped and hummed, keeping her alive through sheer technological will. Her face was pale, her lips slightly blue, her chest rising and falling in shallow rhythms. That didn't look like breathing at all. Ethan sat beside her and took her hand. It was cold, too cold. He remembered the river, remembered the way Lena's skin had felt when he pulled her from the water. He had saved a stranger that night. Now he couldn't save his own daughter. The doctor explained the situation in calm, clinical terms. Maya's heart was failing faster than they had anticipated. She needed surgery within the next 48 hours. The procedure was risky. 30% chance of complications. 10% chance she wouldn't survive at all. But without it, She had no chance. The surgery costs $180,000. The doctor said, "Your insurance covers about 40%. The rest, the rest was impossible." Ethan had lost his job. His savings were gone. He had nothing left to give, nothing left to sell, nothing left to sacrifice except his pride. Lena arrived an hour later, still wearing the clothes she had slept in. She took one look at Maya, at the machines, at Ethan's devastated face, and pulled out her phone. "I'm paying for it," she said. "All of it. Don't argue with me. I can't let you do that. You can't stop me." Her voice was still wrapped in silk. "That little girl is the only good thing I've found in years. I'm not going to let her die because you're too proud to accept help. This isn't about pride. Then what is it about?" Ethan looked at his daughter, at the wires keeping her alive, at the woman standing beside him with tears streaming down her face. He thought about all the walls he had built, all the people he had pushed away, all the times he had convinced himself that needing no one was the same as being strong. "I'm scared," he said finally. "I'm scared that if I let you save her, I'll owe you something I can never repay. I'm scared that you'll become part of our lives and then disappear like everyone else. I'm scared of losing her. I'm scared of losing you. I'm scared of everything." Lena knelt beside him and took his face in her hands. "I'm scared, too. I'm scared every single day, but I'd rather be scared with you than safe alone." She paid for the surgery. She sat beside Ethan in the waiting room for 9 hours, while doctors cut open his daughter's chest and tried to repair a heart that had been broken since birth. She held his hand when he cried, brought him coffee he didn't drink, talked to him about nothing and everything just to fill the silence. When the surgeon finally emerged, his face was unreadable. Ethan stood up so fast, he knocked over his chair. "She made it," the surgeon said. "The next 24 hours are critical, but she made it." Ethan's knees buckled. Lena caught him, held him up, let him sob against her shoulder while the hospital hummed around them. He had never felt so weak. He had never felt so grateful. But even as relief flooded through him, a darker thought crept in. He had almost lost Maya. His daughter had almost died while he was distracted by media storms and board meetings and a woman who had walked into his life like a hurricane. Maybe the river had been a warning. Maybe saving Lena had been the first step toward losing everything that mattered. He pushed the thought away, buried it deep where he wouldn't have to look at it, but it didn't disappear. It just waited, patient and cold like water under winter ice. Maya recovered slowly. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into something resembling normal. She laughed again, ate again, asked questions about butterflies and horses, and whether Lena would come visit today. The surgery had bought her time, maybe years, maybe decades. Nobody could say for certain, but Ethan couldn't shake the darkness that had settled in his chest. He started pulling away from Lena. Small things at first, missed calls, canceled dinners, excuses that grew thinner each time. He told himself he was focused on Maya, on rebuilding their life, on getting back to work. But the truth was simpler and uglier. He blamed her, not rationally. He knew in his logical mind that Lena hadn't caused Maya's collapse, but his heart didn't operate on logic. His heart remembered jumping into that river, leaving Maya alone on the bank. His heart whispered that if he had just walked away that night, if he had chosen his daughter over a stranger, none of this would have happened. Lena noticed the distance growing between them. She didn't push, didn't demand explanations, but her eyes carried a hurt she couldn't hide. She had finally opened herself up to another person, finally allowed herself to hope, and now she was watching that hope slip away. "Talk to me," she said one evening, standing in his apartment while Maya slept in the next room. "Tell me what's wrong." Ethan couldn't look at her. "Nothing's wrong. Don't lie to me. I spent 15 years lying to myself. I know what it looks like." He was quiet for a long moment, struggling to find words for feelings he didn't fully understand. "I keep thinking about that night on the bridge." "What about it?" "I left her, Lena. I left my daughter alone on a freezing riverbank to save a woman I'd never met. What kind of father does that? The kind who believes every life matters. But her life matters most." His voice cracked. "She's everything. She's the only reason I'm still here. And I almost lost her because I was too busy playing hero. Lena's face went pale. You think Maya's collapse was your fault because of me? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe if I'd been more focused. If I'd noticed something was wrong. If I hadn't been so distracted by… By what? By me? The hurt in her voice cut through him like a blade. You think I'm a distraction? A mistake? That's not what I said. It's what you meant. They stared at each other across the small living room, two people standing on opposite sides of a chasm that had opened without warning. Ethan wanted to take back his words, wanted to cross the distance and hold her. But his feet wouldn't move. His walls were going up again, brick by brick, and he didn't know how to stop them. I need time, he said finally. I need to figure out what I'm doing, who I am, what kind of father I want to be. And what about us? I don't know if there can be an us. Not right now. Not while Maya's still recovering. Lena's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. So that's it? You're walking away? I'm not walking away. I'm just stepping back. That's the same thing, Ethan. That's exactly the same thing. She left without another word. The door closed softly behind her, and Ethan stood alone in his apartment, surrounded by silence and the weight of his own choices. He had pushed away the only person who had made him feel alive in years. He had chosen fear over hope, isolation over connection. Maya appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Daddy? Where did Lena go? She went home. Baby, it's late. Is she coming back? Ethan looked at his daughter's face. So young, so trusting, so full of love for a woman she barely knew, and felt something shatter inside him. I don't know, he whispered. I don't know. The next few days were agony. Ethan went through the motions of life, work, cooking, helping Maya with homework, but his mind was somewhere else. He kept replaying his conversation with Lena, kept hearing the hurt in her voice, kept wondering if he had made the right choice. Maya asked about Lena constantly. When was she coming to visit? Could they go to the museum again? Did Daddy think Lena liked butterflies or horses better? Each question was a knife in Ethan's chest, a reminder of what he had thrown away. On the third day, he finally admitted the truth to himself. He was in love with her. Somewhere between the river and the hospital, and all those late-night conversations, he had fallen in love with Lena Whitmore, and he had destroyed it because he was too afraid to let himself be happy. That night, he sat beside Maya's bed and watched her sleep. Her breathing was steady now, her color healthy, her heart beating in the rhythm the surgeons had given her. She was alive. She was going to be okay. And suddenly, he understood something he had been too blind to see. Teaching Maya to live didn't mean protecting her from everything. It meant showing her how to love, how to risk, how to reach for connection, even when it was terrifying. If he spent his whole life hiding behind walls, she would learn to do the same. And that would be the greatest failure of all. He picked up his phone and dialed Lena's number. She answered on the fourth ring. Ethan, I made a mistake, he said. I was scared and I pushed you away. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Silence on the other end, then quietly. I'm scared too. I know. But I don't want to be scared alone anymore. They met at the river. It was Lena's idea. Returning to the place where everything began, where death had almost won, and life had stubbornly refused to lose. The water was still cold, still dark, still flowing toward some distant destination. But it looked different now. Less like an ending, more like a beginning. Maya walked between them, holding both their hands. She had insisted on coming, had refused to stay behind with the babysitter. I want to see where Daddy saved the lady, she had said. And neither of them could argue with that logic. They stood at the edge of the walkway, the same spot where Ethan had first seen Lena. The wind was gentler now, the January chill softened by the promise of approaching spring. Ethan looked at the water and remembered the cold, the fear, the desperate struggle to reach the surface. I used to think this place was where I almost died, Lena said quietly. Now, I think it's where I started living. What changed? She turned to look at him, and her eyes were clear for the first time since he'd met her. Not empty, not haunted, just clear. You did, you and Maya. You showed me that it's possible to be broken and still be whole. Ethan squeezed her hand. I'm still figuring that out myself. We can figure it out together. Maya tugged at both their arms. Can we get hot chocolate now? You promised. They laughed. Real laughter. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and true, and walked away from the river together. Behind them, the water kept flowing, indifferent to their small human dramas. But Ethan didn't look back. He was done looking back. The next few months brought changes none of them had anticipated. Lena stepped down as CEO of Whitmore Technologies, not because the board forced her, but because she chose to. She remained on as chairwoman, attending meetings and making decisions. But the day-to-day grind of running an empire was no longer her life. She had spent 15 years building something that almost killed her. Now, she wanted to build something that would let her live. She started a foundation for children with heart conditions. It was small at first, just a few grants and scholarships, but it grew quickly. Maya became its unofficial mascot, appearing at fundraisers and charity events, telling her story to anyone who would listen. She had inherited her father's courage and her mother's determination, and she wielded both with the fearlessness of a child who had already faced death and won. Ethan went back to construction, but not as a worker this time. One of Lena's contacts offered him a foreman position, overseeing a crew building affordable housing in the neighborhoods that needed it most. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest work, and it let him come home to Maya every night instead of chasing overtime hours just to survive. They moved into a new apartment, not Lena's penthouse, which still felt too much like a museum, but a brownstone in a quiet neighborhood with a backyard and a dog named Biscuit, and a radiator that actually worked. Lena kept her penthouse for business meetings, and the occasional night when she needed to remember who she used to be. But her home was with Ethan and Maya. Now, on the 1-year anniversary of the river, they held a small ceremony at the brownstone. Just the three of them, plus Biscuit and a cake that Maya had helped decorate with too much frosting. They lit a candle for Sarah, whom Ethan still loved and always would. They lit another candle for the person Lena used to be, the ghost she had finally laid to rest. "I never thanked you properly," Lena said, turning to Ethan, "for saving my life. You've thanked me about 1,000 times. Not like this." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "This isn't a proposal. Not yet. It's a promise." She opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring, unadorned except for a tiny engraving on the inside. The date of the river rescue. "I promise to keep living," she said. "I promise to keep trying, even when it's hard. I promise to be here for you and Maya, no matter what happens." She slipped the ring onto her own finger. "And when we're ready, when we're really ready, I promise to ask you the question properly." Ethan looked at the ring, at Lena's face, at Maya watching with wide, curious eyes. He thought about all the ways his life had changed in 1 year, the fear and the joy, and the unbearable vulnerability of loving someone again. "I promise to," he said. "I promise to stop building walls. I promise to let you in even when I'm scared. I promise to be the man you saw on that bridge, the one who believed you were worth saving." Maya bounced impatiently. "Are you guys going to kiss now? Because that's what happens in movies when people make promises." They laughed again, and Ethan pulled Lena close, and they kissed while Maya made exaggerated gagging noises and Biscuit barked at nothing in particular. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be hard days ahead. Maya's health would always be fragile. Lena's depression would always be a shadow at the edge of her mind. And Ethan would always carry the grief of losing Sarah. They were 3 broken people trying to build something whole from the pieces they had left. But they were building it together, and that made all the difference. Outside, the river kept flowing. It would flow long after they were gone, carrying its cold black water toward some distant sea. But it was no longer a symbol of death for any of them. It was the place where a single act of courage had changed 3 lives forever. The place where Ethan Carter jumped into the darkness and found something worth living for.